Greetings, seekers of the strange. Paranormal M invites you to join on a quest for the unexplained. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be part of our community of curious minds. Together, let's unravel the mysteries that lie beyond the realm of understanding. Something whispered a name into my ear. When I was younger, my family and I would often go up to the cabin. The cabin is owned by my father's friend who allows us to stay free of charge. The cabin is a part of a small line of about 10 other cabins with a gravel road dividing them. It's a cute little area, and we still visit it to this day. We usually stay a week, but one time I went ice fishing just with my father when I was about 8 or 9. We go up in the winter and in the summer. We weren't planning on staying there for the night, but by the time we were done ice fishing, we were cold and didn't feel like driving. Our house is about 2 hours away. There's 3 bedrooms in total. The one I stayed in that night had a bunk bed. I slept on the top and my dad slept on the bottom. I was on my DS fairly late. I wasn't really tired, and I was probably like maybe 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. Sorry to be so specific, I just feel like it's important to include everything to avoid confusion. But out of nowhere, all sounds completely cut out for me, and all I heard was the name Jackie. Weirdly, I wasn't freaked out by this. It's like I had gone deaf for a few seconds and just heard this name. Then everything was back to normal. I decided to call it a night, and I went to bed. I told my dad a few years later what had happened. The lake next to our cabin was originally a town that was flooded by the government when they constructed a dam back in the late 20s, I believe. What I didn't know is, there was also a large cemetery that was a part of the town. My parents believed this might be an answer to what I experienced that night. When we go to the cabin now, I don't usually see or hear anything besides feeling really uncomfortable when I'm alone. I feel like something really likes me there, if that makes sense. It's not scary, it's just weird. The Girl in the Yellow Shirt. I was around 10 years old when I had my first interaction with something that I couldn't explain. It happened in broad daylight. The whole incident started out like every other weekend. The neighborhood kids all got together to play what we called Ghost in the Graveyard, which is typically supposed to be played at night. But my sister and I could never stay out past dusk due to our curfew. We played a few rounds before it was the tagger. Everyone scattered within the set boundaries. Now we have a long stretch of woods between our townhomes and the highway, the width gradually thinning when somebody would walk from the line of the townhouses that I lived on to the line of the far end of the property. I was traveling parallel to this forest. The particular section I was following was behind a line of townhouses and bathed in shadow. I kept my eye out for anybody who might be hiding, so I wasn't exactly caught off guard when I suddenly heard the crunch of foliage as somebody ran through the forest a few feet away from the sidewalk that I was walking on. My head whipped to the side just in time to see a girl around my age with long brown hair and a yellow shirt dart by me in the woods. I gave chase, thinking it was someone from our group. But before I got even halfway across the line of townhouses, she was suddenly gone, having vanished into thin air. I thought it was weird, but brushed it off and continued playing until everybody had made it to the safe zone. I remember looking over all the other kids and suddenly realizing that no one was matching the description of the girl I saw. Couldn't have been anyone new because no one had moved in lately. The only person who could possibly match the mystery girl's description was my sister and I. Neither of us were in the woods at the time or wearing yellow, or even owned a yellow shirt for that matter. Nerf war gone wrong. Most of the paranormal interactions I had that I can remember are from when I was in high school, and this incident was no different. My sister Crisis and I invited a group of friends over for a Nerf war. That's a brutal name. Sorry for inserting that, but Crisis. Brutal. Anyway, my sister Crisis and I invited a group of friends over for a Nerf war since we had owned a sizable amount of Nerf guns of all shapes and sizes. Now, our house was known to be a hotspot for the strange and unexplained, so we had code words set up for something if the paranormal nature might happen. We always started off with making sure the house was as dark as we could get it. We were actually playing during the day, by closing curtains and covering windows with thick blankets. Crisis's team, they were the first seekers. My group scattered to hide, went upstairs and ducked into the bathroom. Now, the layout consists of 2 rooms. The first room is where the sink was. A huge mirror spanned across the entirety of the wall above the sink. The second room was further in. That's where the toilet and bathtub was. I stayed in the first room looking for a place to hide. That's when I noticed movement behind me in the mirror. I knew for a fact that I was the only one in the bathroom because I was the first one up the stairs. Against my better judgment, I used the reflection to look at the figure. The dark shape was tucked between the open door and the other half of the bathroom and a cabinet, so tall that its head was level with the doorframe. It had no features, just a solid black shape that imitated the shape of a person. Even though it didn't have eyes, I knew it was looking back at me. Next thing I know, I'm just tearing out of the bathroom and just taking the stairs 2 at a time while shouting our code word for an instance like this. Curtains were opened, letting light flood in, and we all gathered in the living room so I could recount my experience. We mutually agreed to stop playing and go outside for a while, so we cleaned up and made ourselves scarce. The blue light. So I'm taking over my sister's Reddit to share my own experience with the supernatural. The setting was a 3-story apartment that me, my sisters, and let's call her Crisis, and Nana. Crisis and Nana. Moved into there after I left my mother's house. It was pretty late, around midnight, and I was the only one awake and was reading on my phone and waiting to get tired. Crisis and I shared a room, while our Nana had the second, which wasn't a problem because it wasn't like we had done it, really none of blah, blah. I'm falling. I think I'm just struck by the word or name Crisis, that I'm falling over everything. Oh well. So for context, the layout of the apartment of our room was, Crisis's bed was against the left wall, and then there was a nightstand that was between her bed and mine, my bed being closest to the bathroom. Now, we only had a blue lava lamp on the bookshelf between the bathroom and my bed as a nightlight, seeing as neither of us were very fond of the dark. The bathroom had 2 doors, one that connected to our room and the other led to the entrance hall, which is where the front door was. The entrance hall opened up into the dining room, which had the kitchen in front of it and the living room to the right. So, on to the story. I was laying on my back and staring at my phone. That's when I noticed something odd. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see a flickering blue light, like a candle. I could see it from the open bathroom door, since we had both left doors open that night. It seemed to be coming from the entryway or the dining room. Ignored it at first because, while Crisis might investigate, I tended to ignore paranormal happenings, racking my brain for anything that might possibly be producing the weird light. There was no rational excuse for this blue light. Dropped my phone flat against my chest to plunge the room in relative darkness. Looked directly into the bathroom. The light was still there. Laid there for a moment, debating what to do, but ultimately throwing my covers back and climbing out of bed. I warily padded into the bathroom, stopping at the threshold of the second door. Goosebumps rose on my arms when I saw that there was no light source. The rest of the house was pitch black. Confused and rattled, I stepped out into the entranceway, and I shit you not, as soon as I left the bathroom, Crisis woke up screaming. I don't think I've ever flinched so hard in my life. I rushed back into the room and flipped the switch for the bathroom. Crisis was clearly disoriented, confused as to why she was even awake. I asked her what she saw, and although Crisis said that she didn't remember, the timing was too perfect for it to just have been a coincidence. Fortunately, that was the only strange experience I had in that particular apartment. Death Dreams. With reluctance, I've decided to share another part of my life that I haven't shared with anybody beside my family and my husband. For as long as I can remember, I've had dreams right before somebody passes away. Most of the time it's been family members, but sometimes it's been people I don't know. I'd first like to point out that my family is familiar with deaths. I say this because we have a large family and are pretty close with each other. My husband and I were discussing death, and why we were so uncomfortable with it. He shared that he had only had about 5 people he was close to pass. I had like 33 that my mother, father, and myself could think of. I would have rather had vague dreams about the deaths, but most of the time, due to the circumstances, I could decipher who it was. The 2 that stand out most are my grandfather's passing and my mother's cousin. My mother's father was a very hard-working brick mason. He'd never show weakness. When he was a child, he and his brother had to have blood transfusions. Both of them, unfortunately, got leukemia. My grandfather's brother chose to do chemotherapy and passed when I was 2. My grandfather chose to take chemo pills and lived until I was 10. Like I said earlier, my grandfather was a brick mason and a very hard worker. He worked up until a week before his death. We all know when he stopped working that the cancer had gotten better of him. For that last week, my mother and her sisters called in hospice nurses. They're the end-of-life nurses, essentially. The night that everybody was sure it would be his last, my mother and father called my father's aunt and uncle to take us to their house for the night. My entire life I remember going to kiss my grandfather and telling him goodbye. I remember my great aunt and uncle being there to take us to their house for the night, but I never really remembered going to their house or waking up to go to school the next day. But I remember the dream I had, like I was present in a room as my grandfather passed. In the dream, I was standing at his bedroom door watching his breathing slow, watching his daughters coming in and out of the room, and eventually all of them gathering together as he took his last breath. I would also like to point out that my mother knew about my dreams and came to accept them. The day after his death, I remembered my mother and father coming up to the school to pick my sisters and I up. I still see her walking down the hall to meet us with absolute sadness on her face. I was the oldest, and my sisters were still pretty young. So she looked down at me and said Pawpaw had passed. I was confused in my little 10-year-old mind why she was telling me this when I really thought I was there. I told her. I know, Mom, I was there. She told me I wasn't there, but asked why I believed I was. So on the way home, I told her about my dream, and I could see my parents exchanging glances in the front seat. Later in life, she told me my dream was accurate with the events that went on that night. But how do you deal with a child that has these dreams? The next dream happened when I was a little bit older. I would say I was about 15 or 16. At the time, my mother's uncle was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He was a very sweet man who was religious and loved to play the guitar. The one thing that stood out to me about him was his fingernails. I thought for a guy they were pretty long. The family knew he was pretty sick and his passing would be soon. I went to bed like normal with no discussion of his looming passing, and I hadn't thought about it really. In this dream, I could see a casket. I went down the arm to see long fingernails, but I could also see flames behind the casket. I woke up distraught. All I could think about was this very religious, very kind-hearted, loving man going to hell. If he went to hell, then I wasn't making it to heaven. I jumped out of my bed to talk to my mother about my dream. flung the door open and she was already on the phone. She was upset and I thought I knew the news that she was receiving. After she hung up the phone, before she could say anything, I asked it, was it her uncle? She said no, it was her cousin. Apparently, her cousin and her husband had kind of went to bed, and sometime during the night her house had caught on fire. They had both passed. Everything in my dream came rushing back to me, and it all made sense now. The very feminine nails, the flames, all of it. I told my mother about my dream and how I thought her uncle had went to hell. I was the death of her cousin, but I was still relieved that I didn't dream of somebody going to hell. My Mother's Day visits. In 2013, I believe it was Thanksgiving Day, my sister and I found out we were both pregnant. We were both very excited to be pregnant together. We are the closest of the four of us siblings and thought it would be a great way to share this experience. I had already had 2 children and she had 1, so the pain was trying to go to each other's doctor's appointments and have a baby shower together. In January was my first ultrasound. She wasn't going to miss that, so we went to the appointment and she sat next to me excited to see her new niece or nephew. The ultrasound technician came in and began, and like I said, I had 2 children and my sister had 1 already. So looking at the screen, you could see my child, but something wasn't right. I couldn't hear anything and thought the tech might have the volume down, and then I stared at the screen, but no movement. Looked at my sister and I could tell she had the same concerns. The tech was nervous by this point and kept moving the wand around saying something, but couldn't tell you what until she said, "Let me go get the doctor." We both knew why. I sat there in silence until they both returned and the doctor came. "Ma'am, your baby has no heartbeat and it's passed." I want to add that my sister is a very soft-hearted person, and I knew the loss of my child crushed her. I, on the other hand, am not bothered by death as badly, and yeah, this was my unborn child, but I have thicker skin when it comes to this. At the time, I was okay. Fast forward to the beginning of February. I was scheduled for a DNC. This is a surgery where the doctors remove the fetus. I didn't want my sister to go to this because this wasn't really a happy time, and my mother told me that she'd go with me instead. We're also very close, so that was great. The day of the surgery, however, my mother woke up with the flu and was so sick. My dad reluctantly stepped in. Not because he doesn't love me, but because this was awkward for him. I remember laying in the bed before the surgery, my dad next to me in the chair. We were watching the news. They were calling for snow, which didn't happen often in the city that we were in. Then the nurses came to wheel me to surgery. In this part of the hospital, all of the patients were in rooms against the back wall with all glass fronts. Curtains for privacy. At the end of the hall were a set of double doors. You went right and then immediately left into another set of double doors to the surgery suite. I remember climbing onto the surgery table myself because I'm very stubborn. The last thing I remember is the anesthesiologist taking me and then telling me to count back from 10. I remember getting to 9, and the next thing I knew I woke up in recovery feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My throat hurt and my body ached. I'd also like to point out, my dad's side of the family doesn't do well with anesthesia. Doctor came to see me and said that he had to put a tube in my throat because I stopped breathing. But everything else was fine. So a couple of hours later I was released. I just wanted to go to bed. We'd just gotten out of the hospital driveway in the first stoplight and it began to snow. We had a 30-minute drive and had plenty of time for small talk and enjoying the snow. We arrived at home and I asked my mother if she could watch my children so I could take a nap. By this time she was feeling better. I'm pretty happy to do so. Now, here's where my ghost story comes to play. As I said before, I wasn't emotionally torn up by my loss or very religious at this point in my life. I crawled into my bed and went to sleep. Then I started dreaming. In the dream, I was back at that pre-surgery room with my gown on and those fuzzy socks they give you. But now I was alone in the room and standing at the door. Looking down the hall, I could see myself. Well, the back of me walking down the hall to the double doors. And with me holding my hand was a little boy about 1 year old, curly blonde hair, jeans on. But I could see his little diaper sticking out. A long-sleeved burgundy shirt holding a sippy cup in the other arm. We got to the double doors, and I was like holding on to my child's hand. The doors opened, and all I saw was an extremely bright light and heard a voice saying, "I'll take it from here." I woke up ruined emotionally. Was crying and heartbroken, but happy all at once. My mother came to see what was wrong because she said I hadn't been asleep that long and thought I was in pain from surgery. I told her about the dream, and she hugged me and started to cry with me. I know I got the chance to see my child, and now every year on Mother's Day, no matter how cold, a tiny blue butterfly always finds me. I know some people will say I'm looking for it, but I know it's my son coming to visit me. It always gets super close to me and stays for a bit and then flies off. It gives me such peace. The last thing I'd like to add is after my surgery, my sister went to the doctor and her baby had passed as well, and felt guilty. I felt like she was so upset about my loss that it caused hers. Don't feel guilty. I think it followed me to my new place. A while back I acknowledged that what may have been a lapse in judgment on my part. I moved out of my house where I was experiencing a number of strange occurrences. I moved out because I'd gotten a better job and I'm sort of attending college part-time, so I had nothing to actually do with the house itself. But I'm fearful that whatever it was may have followed me to my new place. I moved into a 2-bedroom, maybe an hour and a half away from where I was living before. I've been here for a little over a month now. About a week ago, I started noticing sort of a few things that you could say were strange that just didn't seem right to me. The first thing that happened was this aggressive tapping outside my window. Sounded kind of like somebody's fingernail hitting my window from the outside. I live on the 2nd floor, so I don't know how this would be possible. If I had to make an educated guess, I'd say that maybe there could be an explanation for that. But it is a little creepy regardless, because it'll do it, I'll check it out, and then as soon as I'm sitting back down, it'll happen again. The second thing that happened that I can't explain is the door to my bedroom slammed shut as I was leaving. The door wasn't even remotely closed when this happened. Don't exactly know how to really write about this fear, but it scared the hell out of me. So much so that I needed to go to the gym just to work my nerves out. The last thing which happened last night was when I opened my closet door. The closet came with a mirror inside of it, which I already don't like. When I opened it to get my bag, I could see my reflection, but also the dark silhouette of a figure standing next to me. I'm 6'1", and whatever it was sort of sat near me and was roughly a little taller than my elbow. Turned around, but of course didn't see anything. I'll say that this was not my imagination, as I had seen it for a couple of seconds. This scared me completely, like I could feel my knees getting weak and my heart rate rising. Something happened on a ranch. During a school break, me and my mom and one of my older brothers went to go visit our uncle on his ranch in Nevada. I have trouble sleeping, so one night I decided to take a walk around the perimeter of the ranch, just for some air. I had made it all the way to the other side of the ranch, to the far end of the pastures. From the last fence to the woodsy hill area, it's about 50 yards. I decided to stay and look up the grassy area to look at the stars. What nobody had told this city girl was that with no trees and no light save for the barn on the other side of the ranch, you can see so many fucking stars. It was breathtaking to see the universe like that. I started whistling. I heard a branch crack, so I stopped, a little startled. Then something else started to whistle right at me. I froze, and it seemed like every hair in my body stood straight up. I couldn't move, and the whistling got louder and closer. It was almost exact same nonsense melody I was whistling not 15 seconds ago. I know what you're thinking, but birds are a thing. Bull fucking shit. I know the difference between a bird and whatever the hell that was. And this ain't even over yet, so buckle up. I, the stupid white girl in a horror movie, decided to say, hello? Something said, hello, right back to me in my own voice. Oops. And yes, I know what my voice sounds like. Slightly raspy, faint Bronx accent, usually lower pitched unless I'm excited or mad. Then it's usually so high-pitched my friends say I sound like Harlequin on Adderall. Another branch snapped, and that was my cue to fucking book it back down around the paddock's back barn and main house, which was about 2 acres maybe. It was like a blur. I have knee issues from a car crash, but I didn't feel even an ache as I sprinted all the way back to my main house. I still don't know what it was. Didn't tell anyone else about it, despite my mom being an extremely superstitious person. I did a little bit of frantic Googling the day after, and the closest thing I could come up with was a skinwalker. Is an imitator always aggressive? I work in a basement at a bank. I have several coworkers. I love my job, everybody gets along great, the basement's well lit, cheerful, tastefully decorated. Very nice. And recently renovated. We have very comfortable catered conditions. We have fun conversations throughout the day. Nothing creepy at all, except for the old vault. It's an underground tunnel which used to connect to a bank across the street, but it's been sealed off in the middle. So now it's just a creepy underground tunnel in the electrical closet. But I don't feel it's malicious, it's just that dark, unknown tunnels are just naturally creepy. A couple years ago, before the basement was renovated, a few loan officers were still working in their offices in the basement after 5:30. A normal occurrence. On one end of the basement was one of those big plastic trash bins on a rolling cart. Suddenly, the trash can on a rolling cart made its way across the basement floor before rolling to a stop in a now call center. The room went silent. Everybody quickly left together, unnerved. Being a bank, cameras record inside 24/7. They kept the footage of the basement from 5:45 to 6:15 and saved it in our internal server. Nothing extraordinary happens in the footage, a few bugs with discernible bodies and wings fly in and out of frame in an erratic pattern. Then there are orbs. There's literally nothing else I can call them. They're clearly round circles that move smoothly. Occasionally disappearing, but reappearing exactly in the path you'd expect them to be moving in. I'm sure I can find a way to share this video if there's enough interest. And worst case scenario, I can use my phone to record the computer screen. We've been down in the basement for about 7 months now, since the remodel and renovation was completed. There's nothing to report save for an extremely small and minor, but reoccurring occurrence. Reoccurrence, you could say. Our call center is made of cubicles that you cannot see over unless standing. My coworkers and I have all been alone in the call center at one point, and each of us have experienced the sound of somebody sitting idly at a desk across from yours, directly across or diagonally. Not discernible typing, but the sound when somebody just kind of rests their fingertips on the keyboard when they're thinking of what they're going to type. Brief movements of the mouse on the desk and general desk shuffling like brushing aside pens and paper. It was to the point where each of us have at one point asked aloud, "Oh hey, didn't realize you were back from lunch already." Only to be met with silence because coworker is still at lunch. One of the offices in the basement needed some kind of work done in it, so they moved the manager who works in that office across the basement to another office temporarily. He's already back to his old office, but he wonders if something about that office being occupied has some kind of effect on the energy. The manager from that office could see the Christmas tree in the middle of the basement. Yep, it's almost March and still up, whatever. One day, just a week ago, movement caught his attention and he watched two ornaments on different sides of the tree fall, roll, and meet each other in front of the tree. A note that these were his personal ornaments he brought from home to decorate the tree with. He took them home today. The manager would frequently yell out, "Hey John, come over here," across the basement when he was in his original office. Now all he had to do was speak it to an inside voice since he had temporarily moved into the office next door to the employee. They had several times summoning him to pass on a report that needed to be done or a member that needed to be called. On the last day of being in the temporary office, John heard his boss say from the office next door, "Hey John, come over here." He got up and went to the office to ask what boss needed, only for the boss to tell him that he never summoned him. John swears that he heard this clear as day in his boss's voice. That was last week. Today, as my coworker Kayla ends her call, another coworker, Tiffany, asks, "Hey, why did you say my name on that call? What's up?" Thinking she had previously spoken to the member, Kayla tells Tiffany that she never mentioned her name. Tiffany states that she heard Kayla clear as day say her name. The energy that resides in the basement is always described as friendly and harmless. And I agree, even with my involuntary shielding ability, it seems to bear no ill will. But the mimicking is new and honestly kind of gives me the creeps. Is every mimic definitely malicious? And should we attempt to release it and free ourselves from it? Ignore it? Could this be a peaceful energy that simply enjoys mimicking? Or that's all I really knows how to do, maybe. He's been calling to me for months. Back in January, I had a very detailed dream. In this dream, I was sort of burying a body under the patio in a garden. The garden didn't look like mine, but it wasn't one that I recall ever seeing. While I was burying this body, a man who I'd never seen before was standing in front of me, watching me the entire time. He didn't say anything, he just stared at me. I remember how scared I felt, knowing I needed to keep this body a secret. I woke up the next morning remembering every detail, but it was just a weird dream, so I brushed it off. Things started to get a little strange in my house from that day. My dog started to become more reactive, barking and physically scared of something that I couldn't see on my landing. I'd woken up a few times in the night and could have sworn I'd seen a figure standing in the doorway to my bedroom. This wasn't even the worst part. The day after I first started seeing the figure in the doorway, I was changing my bed sheets. I threw back the duvet to find a spot of dried blood on my sheets. Thought that maybe I'd scratched myself in my sleep. I couldn't find any evidence of this. Changed my bed sheets and thought nothing of it. The next day while making my bed, the blood was there again. This has continued every day, and I couldn't find the source of the blood, and it was starting to drive me mad. This figure had become more frequent, almost nightly at this point. Started to speak to it, asking it questions. Maybe it needed help. Never would I get an answer. I was thinking about seeing a medium or getting the house blessed because at this point it was driving me insane. That was until last week. For the first time in months, no figure, no blood, no barking dogs. Everything just stopped. The following day, I was scrolling through social media and came across a photo of a man that was attached to an article. I hadn't even looked at the article title. I was fixated on this picture. As soon as I saw his face, I knew it was the man from my dream. I clicked straight on the article to find that the man's body had recently been recovered from underneath a woman's patio. Turns out she had stabbed him in the neck, wrapped him in a bedsheet, and buried him underneath the garden patio in November. No idea if this is just a weird coincidence or he's been trying to tell me for months what happened to him. That's a good one. Do you believe pets can haunt after their deaths? Throughout my life, I've grown up with 6 cats and 2 dogs. The cats passing slowly over my childhood. The cats we had were Zoe, Tigger, Sheba, Patches, TJ, and Jack, from oldest to youngest. Now, Jack passed away as a kitten. Sheba, the mom, wouldn't feed him. One time, when we had gone out for a couple of hours, she had climbed out of his basket. My mom found him freezing. Despite a ton of effort, he couldn't be saved. The little 9-year-old me was super sad. I cried, and I named him after his passing. The next cat to pass was Tigger. He was a fat cat and kind of hoovered his food, you could say. I hadn't seen him much over the course of the day, and when I would feed him at night, found him unable to stand up on his own hind legs. Mom and Dad grabbed him, nursed him for a couple of hours, and when he woke up the next day, prepping to take him to the vet, he was already gone. The vet suspected he had a heart attack. He picked up his ashes on the 10th birthday. A few months after he had passed away, I woke up in the middle of the night. I had no idea why, but when I looked down, I saw a cat-shaped cloud curled up between my legs. When he was still alive he and Sheba would curl up there together. Over the years, each cat slowly died. Patches in 2006, TJ in 2011. Sheba a few months later, also in 2011. Then we lost our grumpy girl Zoe in the beginning of 2012. That's when I really got to experience the ghost of a cat. Zoe was a climber in life. We'd hear movement up on a high shelf, and then things would start shooting off and hit the floor like spices. She had a bad habit of trying to eat dog food. My dad came out one morning and saw a full-on apparition of her sitting in front of the dog bowl, which she knew she wasn't supposed to do, as evidenced by the fact that she immediately ran away and disappeared. "Earned you're not supposed to be in the dog's food, you little shit," from my dad. She was also very much a window cat. You would always see her trail twitching out from underneath the window covering, tail, which my mom saw on many occasions after Zoe had passed. And finally, my experience. We had a wood-burning stove in this house, and just off to the side of it was a dining table. I was sat in front of them, but still partly between them. Right behind me, I heard Zoe's little "I want attention" chitter. Something I never really heard from her when she was alive, and she was my mom's cat, and only my mom was worthy of that chitter. Even though they've all been gone for at least a decade, I still miss them very much, and I do wish I could see them all again. Unfortunately, we no longer live in either of the homes where the activities happened. Either something in my bed is with me, or my imagination and body going wild when I was younger. So when I was in high school, I had something happen as I slept. Over the years, I've tried to justify it away. I was just asleep, even if I didn't realize it. My arm fell asleep, and that's what happened. If people can strangle themselves with their own hand when they fall asleep, then I could have done this. Only problem with these justifications is I was wide awake at the time. Still to this day vividly remember it. Trying to justify it helps myself, but doesn't change what happened. It was at night, one of those nights where you toss and turn, but can't fall asleep. Not for lack of trying, but not even a tired but can't sleep state. Just wide awake but knowing you should be sleeping. I just rolled over to check the time and saw it was around 3 a.m. Can't remember the exact time, just remember the realization of, I only had 3 hours of sleep if I conked out right then. I rolled back over to my back and threw my arms out in exasperation. Only my right arm, the side facing the inside wall side of the bed instead of the open side, hit something cold and hard. I immediately pull it back, sit up slightly and try to get a better look, and tentatively reach back out. The second I touch that cold, hard thing again, it's just a flurry of movement. Like I woke something up. Can't feel the rush of air. Next thing I know, I'm being dragged back to the headboard by my hair. Something is gripping it and trying to pull me down between the bars of my headboard. I'm fighting for my life, but also can't get a sound out. Trying to scream, but only pants escape, and I'm trying to pull my hair and my head free but can't get a grasp of the narrow space between my headboard and the wall. I finally do get free, but it wasn't from anything I did. I had black spots in my vision at the point where lack of oxygen and still couldn't get in a full breath. I sat in the middle of my bed just circling 360 degrees for about 10 minutes, searching for threats as I tried to get my breath back. Eventually I calmed down, and this was still in my dumb teenage phase with no sense of self-preservation, so I tried calling out for whatever was there. I even stuck my arm down the headboard to see if I could feel anything. Nothing. I then got up and turned on the light, grabbed the flashlight to check under the bed too. It was empty except for a clump of hair that was underneath the headboard by the wall. Didn't get any sleep that night. Never had it happen again. What might that have been? Was it just my arm falling asleep and attacking me? Was it something else? And has anyone had anything like this happen? It's been bugging me for a while, just wondering if I'm the only one to go through something like this. Weird experiences watching The Ring. The first bit of this will be my experience watching The Ring. It came out in 2002. The second bit will be from my brother's experience watching it. I don't know if just watching a movie can bring about stuff like this, but both of us saw it, and we were at our respective friends' houses. Neither of those friends have had any issues with stuff like this before or since. So for me, I watched the movie with my friends. We were in their bedroom with all parents and siblings out of the house for a few hours. It was just the three of us, and we started the movie with the bedroom door shut, and the closet open just a bit so light on side of it wasn't completely dark. We were totally engrossed in the movie. About halfway through, one of my friends asked us to pause for a bit because they were freaking out. So we did, only to realize that the light we left on was now off. So now it was completely dark. We did the whole, you get up and turn the light on, no, you get up and you get up, till I decided to bite the bullet and just go turn the light on myself. I hop off the bed and we all had crowded onto in order to watch the movie. This was before TVs in bedrooms were really a thing for teens. So we all had to cram together to watch it in a tiny portable DVD player screen, and I immediately land in a puddle of freezing cold water. I instantly sprint to the light switch by the door and turn it on. The closet door that we had left open was now closed. The room door that had been closed is now open. The closet light was off, and there was a puddle of water left on each side of the bed. No one besides us was home at the time, and we didn't bring up any of the drinks to the room, so there's no way somebody could have just spilled water. We never finished the movie that night, and I haven't seen it since. About 10 years later, I had come home after being in the Marines. In that time, my younger brother had taken my room, so I used his. Had some other weird stuff happen that I can get into another time, and I was telling my brother about it only to find out that he'd had the same stuff happen to him for years sleeping in that room. This led us to telling each other a bunch of other spooky stuff that had happened to us, and so I told him the story about the time I saw The Ring. It was the first time I told him about it, and he gave a story of his own that happened a few years after when he saw it too for the first time. He was with his friends and their parents. They were all crowded into the living room watching it. About halfway through, around the same part I'd stopped watching the movie, they heard heavy footsteps, and then a door slammed in the hallway behind them, like a loud slam. The dogs there didn't even bark or growl, they were just cowering away from the hallway. The hallway was one that could only be accessed through the room that they were all watching the movie in. No way for an intruder to get in any other way unless they broke a window, while all the windows in the bedroom and the hallway were locked and intact. I even confirmed it later on with the adults who were present at the time, just in case it was my brother over-imagining things. It really did happen just like that. They didn't find anyone in that hallway and had no way to explain what they heard, and also never finished the movie. Not sure at all what might have not really sure what this might have been, but still haven't seen the rest of the movie since. Curious to try again someday and see if some things happen again, but don't really want to tempt fate. Working nights in a care home. When I was 18, I worked in a care home for just over 2 years. It was a home for adults with learning disabilities. There were around 30 residents living there. The building was L-shaped with 4 units all connected to one another. You needed a key fob to enter the building and go through the other units. Across from the units was another building with offices, med rooms, an activity room, and 2 flats upstairs where 2 residents lived. The laundry room was attached to this building, but it was like an extension and you had to go outside to go in there. In the mornings, I'd be doing laundry in the laundry room and I heard whistling in the room. Couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Could have been somebody outside, so I'd brush it off. This happened all the time. Another time I was in the laundry room and I head back to the door folding clothes and I heard someone walk in and say hello. I replied hello. Whoever it was said hello again. When I turned around and say hi again, thinking that they wouldn't hear me the first time, no one was there. We used to mess around on nights filming the corridor in the dark and orbs would fly everywhere. Got a few pictures of faces and stuff, which was just crazy. I really wish I had them now, but my friend changed her Facebook and they were all saved in the messages. One of the girls got a video of the door opening slightly by itself, and these were heavy fire doors. She screenshot the video and the door opened and you can see a person through the glass. One night I was working with 2 other girls. We were sat in the lounge on a break between checks of one of the units watching TV and eating snacks. It was around 3 or 4 a.m. when we heard 3 loud bangs on the glass of the door from outside. We all jumped up and absolutely crapped ourselves. We went to every door in every bedroom. No one was awake and no one was outside. We didn't leave each other the other night. It really shook us up. One of the residents would talk to someone in her room. She couldn't walk or talk in sentences. She would say words and laugh at around 2 a.m. and other residents mentioned seeing people in their bedrooms. On nights there wasn't really one person who hadn't seen something like a shadow or figure. The place was maybe 10 or 15 years old and a lot of people died there, so it's not surprising. I want to know what band was outside the window, what they were playing. Unless it was a bang. Ned. My Nana, my stepdad's mom, and my stepdad told me a lot of stories when I was a teenager about my Nana's house. My stepdad is a non-believer of everything, the paranormal, the afterlife, and religion. So when he told me these stories, I really believe him. He's never been a liar or exaggerates. My Nana lives in the back of a back-to-back terraced housing in the outskirts of Wakefield. I don't really know how long she's been there for. She told me about a spirit she has in her house named Ned. Some small things happened in the beginning, stuff moving around and whatnot. Gordy, my step-granddad, also an unbeliever, seemed to be his main target. He said he'd be walking down the stairs, wash basket at the top of the stairs, and a sock would hit him in the back of the head. Or one day, the wash basket knocked over behind him. He'd put his towel on the rack of the bathroom, and when he got out of the shower, it would be on the floor on the other side of the bathroom. My Nana was sat in the living room one day watching TV. She turned to the side, and a figure stood next to her. He was wearing a striped shirt with large cuffs on the wrists. My Nana ran up the garden screaming to Gordy. She said she was too scared to look at his face in case it was horrible looking or something. Another was when my stepbrother's mom was pregnant with him. She was sat on the sofa and on the leg of her PJs started slowly raising up her leg. My Nana shouted, "Ned, stop!" and her PJ leg dropped back down. My uncle also had an experience. He was on leave in the army. He had a friend staying with him at my Nana's. He let his friend sleep upstairs and he slept in the living room. In the middle of the night, he woke up to the dog flying open. The dog flying open. And the dogs, 2 tiny Jack Russells, came charging into the room looking unsettled. My uncle then saw a figure run from the back door into where the pantry is. He was that scared that he slept on the floor upstairs next to his friend. When I used to stay over, I would share a room with my stepbrother. He's a few years younger than me. He used to be terrified of Ned, and some nights he'd get some really weird feelings. We would wake up hearing someone walking about our room or on the landing. My stepdad didn't say much about his own experiences in that house, but he did tell me that he came home from base one weekend and saw his neighbor across the road pull on his motorbike. It was at his usual home time from work. He waved at him, said hello back. My stepdad went inside and my Nana asked him who he was talking to. He told her the neighbor, and my Nana seemed shocked. That guy had died in a motorbike accident that week. My stepdad didn't know because he was posted a few hours away. The Shadow Man. When I was around 13, my mom, older brother, and I moved into a 3-story built house. It was a new build. It was like a housing estate and only about 5 years old. I had 2 friends over in the middle of the day watching films, and we decided to play a game. Me and my one friend were stood at the top floor of the house in the bathroom, which was directly at the top of the stairs. My other friend was stood at the bottom of the stairs. We were laughing and joking, and then suddenly what looked like a black sheet covered the bathroom door, then seemed to disappear into my mom's bedroom. Me and my friend in the bathroom both looked at each other in disbelief, and my friend at the bottom of the stairs saw it too. She was stood on the stairs in disbelief. I used to help my mom a lot with housework. She was a single parent and worked a lot. I thought I'd hoover up the stairs before she got home. Must have been around 5 p.m. As I was hoovering the stairs, I saw a black figure at the bottom of the stairs looking at me. I stood straight, turned around, always thought of him as a he, ran into the wall and seemed to fade into the wall which connects to the garage. Nearly every night I would wake up at random times to use the toilet, and he would be there, just stood in my bedroom. The thing is, though, he never scared me. Didn't feel frightened or uneasy when he was around. I felt like he may have been looking out for me. But you never know. Me and my friends gave him the name Simon, a name that popped up into my head after seeing him a couple of times. Other little things would happen, like things moving around the house when I swore I put them somewhere else, or I would hear someone on the stairs when no one was in, or feel like someone was in the room with me. But yeah, like I never really found him to be scary or make me feel uncomfortable. When I told my mom about it, she told me not to be silly and to stop watching horror films. But I overheard her talking to my stepdad, saying things that she thought something was in the house. I got talking to someone in the village I lived in. He said the housing estate was built on what was believed to be a Roman burial ground. Never heard that one. It was right on the river, and I know back in the day it was the quickest way from the village to the other village. Maybe a lot of bodies got dumped there when they're being carried back to their villages. It used to happen a lot back then. One of the strangest paranormal experiences of my childhood. Have you ever heard of the back rooms? That maze of nondescript rooms and hallways that seems to repeat itself over and over again. A place with no windows, no doors, and no obvious way out. A place where you always feel like you're being watched. Just a creepy pasta, right? Just some strange story you read online. Nothing to worry about, it isn't real. It's real, and I've been there, or at least to some version of it. I have to be lying, right? After all, I'm just some random person on the internet. You don't know me, and I don't know you, but I'm not lying, I promise you. My name is Cole. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I grew up in a town in upstate New York. My childhood home is old, built around 120 years ago. The land it was built on is even older still. My town sits near what was once a front line for the both French and Indian War. The American War for Independence, also known as the American Independence. Because of the amount of historical bloodshed that occurred around my area, we obviously have had our fair share of not-so-living residents. My town and several of the cities around me are known for ghostly hauntings. I can also attest to that. The area is practically a swirling pit of paranormal energy. So it comes with no surprise that my home is among the many to experience its share of inexplicable goings-on. From toilet lids slamming to doors opening and closing, unexplainable footsteps, and even the occasional appearance of a strange shadowy figure moving in the corner of your eye. There was even a point in time where I was too afraid to sleep in our living room, simply because I was paranoid of what might happen. Before my being to be able to tell the backroom story, I have to give you a basic layout of the house. It'll be pretty important in just a little bit. When you approach our house from the street, you'll notice that it's basically at the top of a small hill. You have to kind of go up 2 steps just to get to our property. Then it's another small set of stairs onto our front porch. Then another real step up into our home, and when you enter the front door, you enter into what my family calls our front hallway. Basically, it's a pretty good-sized room separate from the rest of the house by a pair of beautiful French doors. To the left is the main staircase to the second floor, and to the right is my dad's office, what used to be the front parlor. For those of you who don't know that there's sort of a reason for the living room, it's, well, pretty well called a living room, basically. Funeral parlors didn't become popular until about the 1920s. So when a person died, their funeral was held at home. And considering how the front parlor in my home is set up, I don't doubt that there is at least one funeral held there. Anyway, after you pass through the French doors, you come into the dining room, living room separated by a good-sized archway, and then a short hallway leading to the basement door. A second staircase in the kitchen with a butler's pantry and a small half-bathroom attached. The second staircase is different. Where our main staircase is, it's grand. Obviously meant to impress. This one isn't. It's dark, fully enclosed, and hidden away behind a solid wood door. If you walk up the main entrance, you will enter into a moderately sized hallway. To the immediate right, you'll come across the first and arguably largest bedroom. Down the hallway and around a left turn are the other 2 bedrooms. Large bathroom, a door to the second staircase, and my mother's sewing closet. And a nursery. My childhood bedroom was directly across from my mother's sewing closet. I used to sleep with my door open and always terrified of my mother's sewing closet. It's closed off by a set of double doors, but there's always been something dark about it. To me, unless the light was on and my mother was actively working in there, it always seemed like there was something lurking inside. Something evil. I had a number of experiences in that room, most of them not involving my mother's sewing closet. There are a few experiences, however, that stick out in my memory. They're a bit far. Well, they're, I guess, rather, by far, the strangest dreams I've ever had. Alright, I said it. My strangest experience revolve around dreams. Go on, poke some fun. I'll wait. Poke, poke. You done? Okay. So all throughout my childhood, I would have strange experiences around the time I'd be falling asleep or shortly thereafter. There are a few times where I can remember waking up in my mom's sewing closet. In front of me was the narrow opening to the closet. This closet actually does exist, and it really is as creepy as I'm about to describe. It wasn't so much a closet as it was a gap between the walls. All exposed rafters, an old dirty linoleum floor, and no light source to speak of. In my dream, I would always walk into the closet. I would walk and walk, never reaching the end. I'd either turn left or right and climb through a little hole in the wall. What I saw on the other side still weirds me out. I actually try to not think about these dreams as much as possible. Anyway, I would enter into what looked like a near-perfect replica of my own home, only it was massive, seemed to go on forever, and everything was pure white. What was strange, though, was no matter where I went, in this other house I could never find my own room. It's like I didn't exist. The door would be, there'd be nothing. In fact, no matter which hallway I took, always ended up back in the main area of the house. The first few times I had this dream, I felt completely safe. It was just me, this weird-as-fuck house, and a childish need to explore. When the dream was about to end, I would always end up climbing back through the hole, back through the closet, and into my mother's sewing closet. But then it changed. The more I dreamt of that place, the more degraded it became. What had once been a pure white had turned into a dirty, sickly yellow. The place had once been consumed by a soft white light. That glow was long gone. In its place were dingy, flickering lamps that seemed to create more shadows than they did light. I went from loving the thrill of freedom and exploration to becoming almost scared to move. I would still explore, but I felt like I was being watched, like I was being haunted even. Those dreams would end up with me running for the hole and escaping my mother's sewing closet as though somebody had set my ass on fire. Thankfully, I haven't had a dream like this in years, for which I am very glad. Every time I think of what I saw, I can't help but shudder. Haunting of the Stockade District. To help set things up, I should tell you that I live in a small town that's more of a suburb for a city just across the bridge. The city across the bridge is several hundred years old. It was founded in the late 1600s. It was little more than an outpost for those who wanted to govern themselves. It was a small, little more than a few city blocks. Decades passed with little consequence for the little community. However, that was not to last. In the weeks and months prior to February 8th, 1689, the people of the outpost wrote repeatedly to the regional governor. Their walls had no guards, their garrison was empty, and they didn't have enough cannons. In short, the outpost was defenseless. It was in the middle of the French and Indian War. They came that fateful night on February 8th. The French and their Native American allies came knocking. The raiders came down upon the outpost in the middle of a cold New York winter. They marched past 2 snowmen the town had erected as the one and only defense. Through the snowed open gates, they waltzed into the middle of the slumbering town. In a frenzy, the French and their allies razed the town to the ground. Of the town's inhabitants, 60 were killed, including 38 men, 10 women, and 12 children. A portion of the Albany militia, along with their Native American allies, pursued the raiders, in the hopes of rescuing the 27 captive villagers as well as the 50 horses the French had stolen. Sadly, the rescuers were only able to liberate 5 men. The rest were taken back toward Montreal, where they said to have been tortured to death by one of the Native American tribes that allied themselves with the French. Those who survived and escaped capture, they fared little better. They were forced to trek through the wilderness on a cold February night with nothing more than their night clothes to keep them warm. Many did not survive the journey. As if this story weren't brutal enough, the French are said to have done horrid things to the villagers they terrorized. There is one tale in particular that stands out. It's that of a young mother trying her burning home, with her infant wrapped tightly in her arms. She made for the door. She found her path blocked by a young French soldier. Backing away, she found herself cornered against the flames. "Is he heavy?" the soldier asked the young woman. She had done little more than nod when the soldier ripped the baby from her arms. He held the baby by the feet and swung. The child's head smashed into the doorway, splattering its mother with its brain. Whatever happened to the mother afterwards is unknown. That was the worst thing I read this month. I apologize to anybody listening. Hundreds of years later, and the remains of the victims are buried in a local cemetery, original headstones and all. It's called Vale Cemetery if you want to look it up. As sad as their fate was, it seemed that even in their eternal rest, they're still tormented. To this day, there are reports of statues bleeding from the head, screaming and crying. I can vouch for the strange things happening there. A few years ago, I decided to try some new photography techniques. I'd gotten a camera for Christmas, and the weather had finally started to warm. My friend and I decided to explore the historical sites of the neighboring city. The first place we went was Vale Cemetery, so I could use some of the statues to practice taking portraits ahead of my participation in a weekly art class that I'd started taking that winter. Once I got home that evening, I went to put all the images I'd taken that day onto my computer so I could weed them out. The fine-tuned ones I decided to keep. only to find that every single one of the several hundred I'd taken at Vale Cemetery to either be gone entirely or corrupted beyond use. To this day, the entire district that was built on top of the burned outpost is extremely haunted. It's also said that Vale Cemetery is extremely haunted too, with reports of black and white figures walking between headstones, shadows that sit among the branches of the trees, strange singing in the church, and statues that cry and bleed. Are there any urban legends that you've experienced firsthand? So here's my story. When I was 14 years old or so, I used to experience some creepy as heck stuff in my sister's 2-story house. She never believed me and accused me of making it up to try to scare her family. So we used to sleep over all the time, but slowly things started happening. I kept waking up at 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. I was always having trouble falling asleep, so they would all sleep at 9, and I wasn't used to that since my mom would let me sleep whenever I wanted. Well, it started off with me just having sleep problems, but then I started noticing a dark spot in the hallway, darker than anything else around it. And at night I'd stay over, kind of just started to get darker and more detailed, till I finally realized it looked like a man standing in the hallway. I was looking into the room I was in, or so I thought. I couldn't make out the face all, I just knew he was wearing a hat and he would stare into the room, obviously. I'd be freaked out and I would force myself to sleep. One time I remember going to the swap meet and my sister's family had some lady who went up and grabbed my hand and told me, "You see stuff, don't you?" I was puzzled and my sister intervened and said, "I can help you." She then turned to my sister and told her that she sees things that are trying to get her attention. Don't let her interact with them, they're dangerous, and they know she can see them. They want to cause harm, so be very careful. She turned to me and said, "Don't talk to them, don't give them your attention." She walked away, and she was a completely random woman, but I remember the day so clearly. It was during the time the paranormal stuff was happening at the house, and then everything that was happening became too much. I didn't want to sleep over, but my nephew insisted I did, because they wanted to spend time with me, so I decided on the worst. And last night, changed rooms, I slept at the next room with my niece who was around 8 or something years old. I was thinking things would be different, but oh was I wrong. That night I had no trouble falling asleep, but this time something changed. Instead of me waking up on my own, my niece woke me up at 3 a.m. to take her to the bathroom. So I did. We went back to bed. As I was lying there having trouble sleeping, and I heard a little girl giggling. I turned to look at my niece and just asked what was so funny. She was fast asleep at the same moment. A kitchen toy set that was no longer working or had batteries went off. The toy sound of bubbling, not water, but went right off after the giggles, and I turned to look down the hallway and realized the shadow wearing a hat had been looking into that room the whole time. Not the other one I was in to begin with, but when I freaked out and something started pounding on the wall right next to my ear, I pulled the covers over my head and panicking, thinking, holy moly, I don't want to get dragged downstairs. Then everything went quiet. And all of a sudden I hear something whisper my niece's name into my ear. Well, I don't know why this was happening, but after that night I decided never to sleep over at my sister's house ever again. Skip years ahead. Now a few months ago I'm watching a YouTube video online of urban legends, paying half attention as I'm crafting something when I hear the words. This legend is about a hat man, and it instantly got my full attention. I looked up scary stories after the hat man, and everything everybody was saying is exactly like how the stuff happened to me. I never knew the legend of the hat man, but apparently I experienced it, and hearing it now of some of the people with worse experiences and even physical ones, I'm feeling very lucky. There was other paranormal things that happened to me in that house, and to my nephews, but that was probably the worst thing to ever happen to me. First period. For those of you who don't want to read the whole thing, my experience with an urban legend was the Hat Man. See ya.